I've got several episodes of experience that makes me an expert.
It's been a few weeks since we kicked the show off talking Cyberpunk 2077, so for old time's sake, let's talk Cyberpunk. And it's not actually all bad. It's not all good, but it's not an all bad story either. There's a few things going on with them. CD Projekt Red released patch 1.2 for Cyberpunk 2077 this week. It hit console and PC versions of the game on Monday, and the Stadia version is getting cleaned up later on in the week. The patch is pretty big. The list of details included with it is literally hundreds of bullet points long, and it ends with "and many more." So there's hundreds of updates plus many more, and we are going to break down every single one of them right now. No, of course we're not going to do that, but it covers everything. All kinds of aspects of this game are being updated right now. There's little stuff like the actions that characters take between other actions, all the way up to improving the game's performance on all fronts. Better audio, better visuals, the game runs better, obviously less crashes and bugs, stuff like that. It enables ray tracing on AMD graphic cards. I don't entirely know what that means, but I'm sure you PC Master Race nerds do. You can find the entire list of everything included in this patch on the CD Projekt Red website. I did scroll through it, but I have not played Cyberpunk 2077 yet. I'm waiting. So a lot of it is kind of gibberish to me because I don't understand anything that mentions particular characters or story aspects or anything like that. But whether they're selling us a fake bill of goods or not, there's a lot of shit included in this patch. Raul wrote into us on Patreon and said, "Seems like the game is still a bit glitchy, but from what little I played of it after it was released, it did intrigue me with its world lore, and some of its gameplay mechanics. I'm cheering for this game to make a comeback, as aside from some bonehead moves from CD Projekt Red's management, this game does feel like a labor of love, and I'm excited to give it another shot." You know what? I agree with you, Raul. I have no sympathy whatsoever for the executives at CD Projekt Red that have had their balls held over the fire for the last 4 months or whatever it's been because of the mess with this game. They're the ones that released a broken game. They deserve all the shit that comes with it. But as I have said in the past on this show many times, the developers, everyone that spent years of their lives developing and creating this game deserved better than this for their art. They didn't deserve to have their art thrown under the bus like this. So I agree. I would also really, really like to see Cyberpunk 2077 redeem itself, come back, and just be a success. Of course I want that, right? At the end of the day, I just like to play video games. So of course I want this game to work. Of course I want it back. I hope this turns into one of the greatest video games of all time, because then we can all play it and we all experience something really special in one of the greatest games ever. Of course that's what I want. I don't understand people celebrating Cyberpunk 2077's downfall, their failure. They fucked up, right? And I don't blame anyone that bought this game for being pissed off that they were sold a broken game. You're not going to hear me criticizing you whatsoever, okay? But it doesn't mean I don't want the game to get fixed and I don't want it to work. Just because it was broken out of the gate doesn't mean that I want it to remain broken forever. Fix it so I can fucking play it, which sounds like that's what they're finally doing. And I will say too, dude, I came on this show for weeks. Every time they were coming out and addressing the criticisms or addressing all the other crap, and I was like, just go away and don't come out of your fucking office until this game is working. Just go away. It's not like you're going to win over any goodwill whining about people whining about your broken game. Just shut up, go fix it, come out and tell us when it's fixed. And it sounds like that's what they've been doing for the last few months, and that's the best possible outcome here for them. Just shut up, fix it, and maybe people will move. I think a lot of people are going to forgive you if you fix it and make this game right. I think that's going to be the general consensus in the gaming community. Not everybody, but a lot of people are going to move on and buy it. I will. I'll play it eventually. I'm not playing it yet. Explode Processing wrote into us on Patreon and said, "I bought Cyberpunk 2077 for next to nothing. It's still sealed. My plan was to invest in the future and play it on a PS5 once they have all the bullshit worked out and it's patched for the PS5. This game, by all means, was meant to be next gen. Crysis was compatible with single core processors once at 640 by 880 by 480 resolution with the graphics set to potato, and that worked out too. I often do this with many games. I buy it on sale, I wait for the game to leave beta, then play it when it's polished. Since there are so many games to grind through these days, I often wait for the complete edition, which costs less than release day, and you get all the DLC, etc., the complete game. Someday, this early release garbage needs to stop. I think Cyberpunk 2077 was a good lesson learned for the industry. No Man's Sky was a good jab too, but its effects didn't last. Maybe this will." Yeah, you know what? I agree with you, Explode Processing. I do. I think this was clearly a next gen game that they tried to shoehorn into old consoles because obviously there was fucking 180 million PS4s and Xbox Ones out there and it just blew up in their face. And I've been saying it since its launch that I'm going to wait for the official next gen version. I have lots to play. Tons of games. I want to experience this game the way it should have been experienced by everybody. Get your bugs out, make it pretty, release the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X ports of it. Then I'll sit down and experience your next gen video game that you tried to make work on last gen consoles, much to your chagrin. And as we've talked about in the past, the Cyberpunk Effect, I think that's going to be a big I really think that it's going to be a long-lasting effect in the world of video games. I hope it is anyway. I'm really hoping the rest of the industry uses what happened here as a lesson. Do not release your game before it's ready. Don't do it, right? Over the last, 10 to 15 years, games have become more and more reliant on just day one patches to make them work. That fucking drives me insane because that never used to be a thing. I don't mind a day one patch if it's fixing little bugs and stuff like that, little, non-game breaking things that you've noticed. I totally support that, actually. Yeah, fuck yeah. Give me the best game you can. If you've got to patch some stuff in, go for it. But there are companies, including CD Projekt Red, releasing broken fucking video games, and they're just banking on a day one patch to make it work. Not everyone has internet access all the time to download day one patches. Not everyone does that, and it's just BS anyway. If you want my money's not broken. My money doesn't need a day one patch. When I give you my fucking $60, you don't have to it's not like you can't spend it right away. It's not like you have to wait for me to send you a patch to make that money show up in your bank account. You get my money right away. If you're getting my money right away, then the product I'm giving you the money for had better work right away. If you can improve it later, fuck yeah. But do not sell me. You're ripping people off. Selling a broken game that relies on a day one patch to make it work, okay? Cleaning it up is one thing. Releasing a broken game and just saying, oh, we'll fix it later, that's bullshit. And Cyberpunk was particularly bad for this because that game was hyped up for like 2 fucking decades, and the powers that be at CD Projekt Red were like, oh, well, we didn't know it didn't work. I mean, wow, that came out of left field. We didn't know this game was broken. The fuck it was, and the fuck you didn't know. If the people that decided to release Cyberpunk 2077 in the state it was released did not know that the game ran like it did, they should all be fired because it is their job to fucking know that stuff. It was ridiculous. Ridiculous. The whole fucking thing is ridiculous. So I really hope that other companies and other developers look at what happened over here and say, that's not going to be us. And I'm really somewhat optimistic that that's part of the reason we've seen so many game delays in the early months of 2021. Obviously, part of it is the pandemic. People can't work in the same office. I'm sure it's causing all kinds of chaos on the development side. But I really do think part of it, too, is people looking at what has happened here and being like, let's not do that. Let's wait. We'll wait before that's fucking us, Drives me crazy. It does sound like Cyberpunk 2077 is closer to being fixed. So that is a good thing. Also, dude, just quickly before I move on, the fact that this game has been on the market for like 5 months and still isn't running at 100% is ridiculous. Like, did you really release it and think the patch that you just dropped this week was going to come out a couple of weeks after you released the game? Like, it's been out for 4 or 5 months now. Where the fuck, Anyway, feels good to rant about Cyberpunk again, just like the old days. And speaking of ye old Cyberpunk 2077, did you realize it's been over 100 days since it got taken off the PlayStation Store? It does not seem like it's been that long, but over 100 days. And we actually have a few more CD Projekt Red little notes to talk about here, because in addition to dropping that jumbo patch on us, they held an investor call this week, and somebody asked, when will Cyberpunk 2077 be returning to the PlayStation Store? And a rep from CD Projekt Red said that while this new patch brings the game closer than ever, the final decision still lies in the hands of Sony. They said, quote, however, the final decision, you have to understand, belongs to Sony. We do believe we are closer, but of course the final call is theirs, so let's wait and see, end quote. And they also told investors that they're optimistic that when the game gets put back on the PlayStation Store, it'll result in a spike in sales across all platforms, which I you know what? They're probably right. That kind of makes sense. Chris Goodfellow wrote into us on Patreon and said, good for Sony. Telling CD Projekt Red to prove their game is playable before they release it in their stores is just smart. And I mean, yeah, it is. I certainly don't blame Sony for this whole mess. I don't think anyone, you can't blame Sony for this. And dude, do you remember when this game came out and then everyone realized it doesn't work on PS4s, and then CD Projekt Red was like, oh, well, if you don't like it, we'll get you a refund. And then Sony was like, whoa. No, we don't do refunds. And it just became a huge problem. And just, I would like to think that Sony keeping Cyberpunk 2077 off the PSN is them standing up for all of us and saying, our players work hard for their money, give them a game that works, we are not going to rip them off. And I just don't think that's why they're not letting this game on the PSN at all. I think the primary reason Cyberpunk is not available on the PSN is because Sony doesn't want to have to deal with any more refunds. You know, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing either, but there are lots of shit games on the PSN. There are lots, and on the eShop, and on Xbox Marketplace. Tons of crappy games get released. It's just that Cyberpunk 2077 was so much bigger than most of them, and people are asking for a ton of refunds, and Sony doesn't want to deal with it. So I don't think they're doing it to protect us. They're doing it to protect themselves. But again, I want to clarify, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't blame them for that. I just would like to think they were kind of sticking up for us too, but I don't. No, they're not. If they can't, no, I'm not even going to get into that. I will say, whether they're doing it to protect us or to protect themselves, I respect them for telling CD Projekt Red, with one of the biggest video games of the last 5 or 6 years, to go fuck themselves when other places didn't do that. And I think CD Projekt Red is right. I do think when PlayStation finally gives Cyberpunk 2077 the stamp of approval and they put it back up for sale, it probably will sell really well because people have been waiting. And if Sony says, hey, we don't ever do this, but we're taking this game off of our store until you fix it, Sony puts it back on the store, I think a lot of gamers are going to take that as Sony being like, hey, we've tested this. We're comfortable with this now. You won't be asking for refunds. Now this works. And when other people on other platforms see Sony do that, then they might be tempted to be like, all right, I've been thinking about picking it up on Xbox, or I've been thinking about getting it on my PC. Now I will, because they're, you know what I mean? Like, because one of the biggest gaming companies in the world is finally giving this game the thumbs up, the green light to go ahead. So if they don't add it to the PSN for a while yet, and then when they do, people are like, this game is great now, this game runs awesome, they might really be able to at least make some people forget about the horrible launch. So I agree with them. I do think that when it finally gets there, it's gonna pay dividends, I think. Just fucking should have been like this to begin with. CD Projekt Red has also announced that they purchased Canadian game developer Digital Scapes Studios out of Vancouver. The studio has been working with CD Projekt Red for the last 3 years during the development of Cyberpunk, and they will now be known as CD Projekt Red Vancouver. As CD Projekt Red said, quote, "We believe that the hugely talented Digital Scapes crew is the perfect foundation upon which to build a wider CD Projekt Red Vancouver team," end quote. And this acquisition comes with the story that CD Projekt Red is planning to increase production and intends to start working on both Witcher and Cyberpunk AAA titles simultaneously, beginning in 2022. They laid out a roadmap explaining that they intend to staff up, bolster their ranks in preparation of developing 2 AAA titles for 2 different franchises at the same time. They also plan to adjust the internal game engine to adapt certain aspects of their gameplay to both games at once to help speed along the development process. Chief Technical Officer I'm never going to say this name right. Powell the Chief Technical Officer of Cyberpunk. Fuck, I don't pronounce names. Powell Zawadny. Good thing he's never going to listen to this because there's no way I said that right. But anyway, the Chief Technical Officer of Cyberpunk, or of CD Projekt Red, said, quote, "We want to be sure that we can work with 2 global brands at the same time while ensuring top quality of our products. We emphasize technological advancements, and we want to set up versatile teams which combine various specializations and competencies. These teams will be further assisted by a cross-project group of experts who, owing to their expertise, can contribute key aspects of development. All these changes aim to enable us to work on multiple AAA games and expansions in parallel starting in 2022, end quote. They did also reveal that they have a plan in place to cut back on developer crunch, intended to, quote, minimize stress and prevent burnout, end quote. And they also really hammered home that they're taking a different approach to game development after the Cyberpunk 2077 launch, particularly when it comes to early game announcements. So I know the first thought most of you probably had was the same one I had, which was, how about you learn to develop one game at a time before you worry about developing 2? And I don't trust CD Projekt Red as far as I can fucking throw them anymore. But we'll wait and we'll see. Because The Witcher 3, while it was also had a rocky launch, is a great fucking game. And from all accounts, so is Cyberpunk when it works. It sounds like it's really a fun game if you're playing it somewhere where you could play it. So assuming they've learned their lessons, they've taken their lumps and they've grown from it, and they take some of the money that Cyberpunk made them and they invested in more staff and more resources, there's no reason in theory that this can't work, that you can't develop these two games side by side. And as a gamer who wants to play good video games, knowing that another Witcher and another Cyberpunk game are both in development at the same time is a great thing. Instead of getting a game, every 7 or 8 years and then waiting another 7 or 8 years for the other one, that's really exciting to me. So kind of drives me crazy that like they fucked so many people and I'm still like, I really want more of your games, but I really do want more of your games. Just give me games that fucking work. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, consider checking out the podcast. I break down the biggest news in the world of video games, sprinkle a little profanity on top, and basically just kill an hour or so of your week. New episodes go live every Monday. Look for Game Patch wherever you get your podcasts or listen at rememberthegamepodcast.com.